Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV. Now, I know it's not long since the last video, and I wasn't actually planning on making another video this week, but I've kind of got that creative buzz, and I came up with a wonderful idea: another watch party. And I've got an absolute doozy for us to do. It is actually it's called Picnic at Hanging Rock, and it's actually considered one of the greatest Australian films of all time. Yes, there is an Australian film industry. I suppose you'd call it Aussie Wood, although I don't know if anyone actually uses that term. If so, I've just invented it. And this is a film which I think will appeal to the HPANWO viewer, the HPANWO TV viewer, because it has several HPANWO-esque themes, like all my watch party films do. This is a film from 1975 directed by Peter Weir. Now, Peter Weir you may be familiar with because he's quite well known in sort of alternative circles, because he's done a couple of like films that David Icke recommends. For example, Dead Poets Society. Have I done a watch party for Dead Poets Society? I don't think I have I? No, that would be actually worth doing a watch party for, actually. And so would the other one, which I think is very significant, The Truman Show. The Truman Show is actually one of the most remarkable films, actually, that I've seen. When it's kind of a satire of reality TV, but it also has several countercultural themes about the world and how it works and what the experience of living in the world is like. So yeah, those are other films I might consider for a watch party. But I'm going to now. This is, of course, about Picnic at Hanging Rock, which is one of Peter Weir's earlier films. It's actually, I think it's his second film. He did a film the previous year called The Cars That Ate Paris, which sounds like a strange film. It's a strange title, but this one's called Picnic at Hanging Rock. It was as I said, it's considered one of the greatest Australian films of all times. It's actually won numerous awards. So unlike some of the films I review, which are completely fringe and sort of very almost unknown B movies, like The Fourth Kind, like They Live, which are really not very well known outside of alternative thinking circles. This one is very mainstream. It received an AACTA award. That's the Australian Academy of Cinematic and Television Arts. Awards. It's got a BAFTA. It won a BAFTA for Best Cinematography. Nominated for a Saturn Award. Yeah, so it's actually very highly acclaimed, this film. Now it's set in Australia in the year 1900. Now that's an important period for Australia, because it's the year before Federation. The actual Federation took place in 1901. And I know that because I was actually in Australia in the year 2000, where they were actually getting ready for the centenary of Federation the following year. Federation is literally the moment that the modern nation of Australia was created. So this takes place the year before that, when the various states were sort of, I don't know exactly what the political world of the Australian continent was in those days, but then the modern nation state of Australia had yet to be created. It was created the following year. This has been described as a mystery film. I would call it a chiller. A chiller being it's not exactly a horror movie, but something which is a little bit creepy, and it's got that creepy feel to it, without necessarily being very horror-like. Although some people have described this as a horror film. One of the critics actually said something very interesting. Horror need not always be about long-fanged gentlemen in evening clothes or dismembered corpses or a doctor keeping a brain in a fishbowl. And he goes on to describe the film, and which I won't. I'm not going to go into the actual plot and content of the movie in this introduction. That will come with the review. But then he describes the film as it works, and he says that it's not gruesome, but it's still disturbing and frightening because it can't easily be defined or explained in conventional ways. So this is regarded as quite a groundbreaking film. It's part of what's known as Australian New Wave, which was probably the golden age of Aussie Wood, and it includes some other well-known. This was one of the first films to achieve made in Australia by an Australian cast and crew, to achieve international success. There was another slightly earlier one actually called Walkabout, which was 1971. That had Jenny Agutter in it, and I remember that well because I felt a bit guilty watching it. If you watch Walkabout, you'll know exactly what I mean. But yeah, this is a film. It was actually produced by people. Was it Hal and Jim McElroy? Directed by Peter Weir, starring Rachel Roberts, Dominic Guard, Helen Morse, Vivian Grey, and Jackie Weaver. Now, who are they? Well, you would know if you watch Neighbours or Home and Away, because see, Australia is strange. You see, Australia seems to have a very small number of actors. I sometimes get the feeling there's only about 30 or 40 of them, and they keep reusing them. So very often, a lot of these film stars, they're in this kind of early in the 70s. They're in this Australian new wave, which is basically through the 1970s in Australia. Then they go on to do the soap circuit when they're older. I mean, there's very few exceptions. Probably the guy who played Crocodile Dundee, Paul Hogan. I think he's probably the only one who hasn't gone through that pattern that Australian thespians inevitably do. So you will probably, when you watch this film, I expect you will recognise some of the faces and voices in the films, even though some of the characters are actually voiced by like voiceovers. So, but you might recognise a lot of the faces. Although they will see them, they'll look a lot younger, probably, to how you know them if you are an Australian soap fan. This is based on a novel by someone called Joan Lindsay. This is a novel from 1967. Now, it was adapted. There was originally the rights were sold to a young boy. Like he was a young chap, 14-year-old boy. I think he was at film school or something. He actually he got the rights and started production on an adaptation. I think it was about 2 years earlier. But this was then cancelled, and the rights were transferred to Peter Weir, which must have, I don't know, must have pissed him off a bit, I imagine. Apparently, although there is a bit of consolation, because he was in mid-production, but he actually shot about 10 minutes of footage, which is actually included it's included in the special edition DVD of this particular film. So it may be worth getting that. I should also point out there are two cuts of this. There's a director's cut, 107 minutes, which was made in 1998. Yet the original running time was 115 minutes. That's the version I've got, and I recommend watching this particular version, because usually when they do these director's cuts, if they're shorter they're worse, if they're longer they're better. That's the general rule, I think. Shorter better, longer worse. So you always get the longest one. I always find it's always the best thing to do. Yeah, this is this is an interesting kind of it's a historical setting. Now, what's common? One common feature of the sort of Aussie wood new wave era, that, as I said, from about 1970 to the mid 1980s at the latest, is that there's a lot of involvement of the Aborigines. Now, this film doesn't have Aborigines in, but it's a kind of undercurrent, because it's what happens is, obviously, as I say, no spoilers. I'm going to do that in the review. But the main action, the main plot, revolves around a place called Hanging Rock. Now, Hanging Rock is a large natural feature. It's actually an ancient volcano, which is it's like a hill, a rocky outcrop in central Victoria, in southeastern Victoria. It's in central Victoria, in the southeast of Australia. And the Aboriginal name for it is Ngangalong. That's what they call it. And these days, the actual local tribes, the Dja Dja Wurrung and the Wurrung, actually have taken ownership of that under the various laws to return land to the Aborigines. And so even though, I mean, this isn't... If you watch Walkabout, for example, I mean, obviously that has a very strong Aboriginal theme. But the Picnic at Hanging Rock also has that theme, although it's much more subtle. It's much more of an undercurrent, and that is involved in the mystery of the plot. Because, like many very dramatic geographical features, Hanging Rock is regarded as sacred by the indigenous people of Australia. Like many of these other very dramatic sort of geological features. And the best known is Ayers Rock or Uluru in the central desert, and there's Katajuta. I've been to these places actually, Katajuta. These are regarded as sacred. They're the realm of the Dreamtime spirits and things like this. And Hanging Rock is one of these. and it is about a group of modern white Australians who go on a they go and visit the place. They go and They go to this place, Hanging Rock, just for a picnic. Hence the title, "Picnic at Hanging Rock." There's a little bit of a spoiler in the title, "Picnic at Hanging Rock." So they go there for a picnic. These schoolgirls, and as I said, no spoilers. Something terrible happens. Something very mysterious and very frightening happens. And there's this sense, I think, that indeed this is consistent with the era that Peter Weir was directing in, that there is a connection to the ancient spiritual traditions of Australia, and that maybe modern white Australians have to contend with that. I mean, you see that very, very starkly illustrated in Walkabout, which is I don't know who directed Walkabout. Walkabout's in 1971. It starred Jenny Agutter. A very young and nubile Jenny Agutter, directed by Nicholas Roeg, right? Yeah, and that is actually quite good. Like I said, I did feel a bit guilty watching it. And you'll, like I said, I'm not going to describe it, but you'll know why when you watch it. But it is actually it's a pretty good film. I thought it was quite well done. It's quite pretty good. It's about this interaction between post-settlement Australians and the indigenous Australians. So it's not unlike some of the neo-westerns, the United States and Canada has its own version of this movement. The neo-westerns like Dances with Wolves and things like that, which involve the Indians in a sort of revised role to traditional Hollywood roles. So now I have seen this film, but this is different. I mean, of all the watch parties I've done, doing this watch party will be a bit more like doing The Day the Earth Stood Still, because I've not watched this since I was a little kid. I remember watching it when I was a small child, and I think I didn't see it to the end actually, because I was quite scared by it. I was very young when I watched it on TV, and my parents. I don't think I cried or anything, but I was quite scared, and I must have told my parents I'm scared of this. And they sent me to bed, so I missed the end of it. So I've actually only watched about half of it, and I don't really remember that very well. But I do remember it being it is creepy and disturbing. But I also remember it does have this amazing soundtrack, which I'll say more about, obviously, in the review. But it's like panpipes. I remember there's these like panpipes. I remember one of my mum's friends was in the room with us. She was visiting us while we were watching it, and she said, she said, "Oh, I know." She said that's, and she mentioned the name of the composer, the score composer, who is it's by Georgi Zamfir, who is a Romanian player, a Romania panpipe player. And it's quite a distinct. You can hear it in the trailer. Actually, it's quite a distinctive little riffs on the panpipe, and it's quite unusual for a movie. But it gives it a very etheric feel, I think, and it sort of fits in with what happens on the rock. Because, like I said, despite the fact it's a frightening and disturbing thing that happens, and indeed, if it happened in real life. I think it does happen in real life. What happens in this film happens in real life. That's the interesting thing, which I'll go into in the review. It would be terrifying. However, it gives it a kind of a different atmosphere. There's a strange, slightly offbeat atmosphere to it partly because of this music and the score. Now, you may have, when you Google the name of the film, you'll see true story question mark on it. Now, there's always been a bit of a dispute over whether or not this is true. Rather, the novel by Joan Lindsay actually is based on a true story, because the novel from which the film is adapted has the same setting, and set on the main action takes place on St. Valentine's Day 1900, which actually was a Wednesday, not a Saturday. So it's actually a Saturday in the story, which is why the girls have a day off school, so they can go off to this picnic. But it is actually a work of fiction. However, the author has always been a bit cagey about whether she actually based this on a real story, because you see the tone, the way the book is written, the way the book is written, it's written in the form of a true story. It's I suppose it's a literal. As a literary rather, it's a literary version of the docudrama. So maybe you can compare it in a literary form to what is the fourth kind in cinematic form, which is the film I reviewed last time in the previous watch party. It's a literary version of that. It's written as if it were a true story. There's even like a police report at the end and things like that, which is completely concocted. But the author has done several interviews where she's rather equivocal over whether it's real or not. She says, "Well, it was written as a mystery, and it remains a mystery. You can draw your own conclusions. That's fine. I don't think it matters." So there you go. You see, it's not based on a true story, but funnily enough, it was mentioned in there's a book I used to have by Arthur C. Clarke. If I can find it again, I'll let you know, because it's actually mentioned in there. It's Arthur C. Clarke's. It's the Mysterious World version of Arthur C. Clarke. If I can find it, I'll let you know. But of course, it's not actually. It is actually. Excuse me. It is actually technically fictional. But I do wonder if there's some kind of. If she heard of something, if she heard of some kind of story, or some kind of like legend or urban legend or a rumor of something happening on those rocks. Because the rocks have this kind of reputation. They were sacred to the Aboriginals. And if you go there, I mean, it was filmed at Hanging Rock. And if you look at pictures of Hanging Rock, it's very, very strange to look at. Like, I'll just show you this one here. That's Hanging Rock there. It looks almost like a natural fortification. It has these large weather-beaten lumps of stone everywhere, and the hanging refers to the fact that some of them are sort of leaning over, and there's various erosion patterns which makes them look top heavy. Let's see if I can find some more photos. Let's see if I can find some more pictures of it. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at some more hanging. I'll ask my brother if he's ever been there, because he actually lived in Australia for a while. Oh yeah, see. Maybe that's what it's called, Hanging Rock. Is that it there? I don't know if that's it, but Hanging Rock, Australia. Here we go. There may be several places called Hanging Rock. See, there's some stills here from the film. You can see there. There's actually a TV series that's just come out about it as well. I think that might be it. There's a new adaptation that came out a couple of years ago. Obviously, it's got the same costumes. The costume design was nominated for award too, and it's been these costumes have been very influential on other productions. You see, that looks like a face there. You see, you can imagine like the Aborigines when they saw that, they might well have imagined there's a spirit living in that rock. Who knows? Maybe there is. You see, I mean, I don't want to run down the. Because of course indigenous populations have huge knowledge which has been lost to the modern world. You see, there it is there. So I think this is like a tour. I think the word they use in Britain for this kind of rock formation is a tour. I've seen tours in Devon or Dartmoor. I've been to various places. I mean, I've filmed at some of them. Look, you see that? You can imagine, for a culture that is impressed by bizarre and unusual geology, and you can imagine that they would actually believe that there were spirits in these rocks. It does have it does have a kind of creepy atmosphere. It has a spooky. These almost look like living people or living beings, sort of leaning in and talking to each other, doesn't they? Yeah. You can well imagine it has like spooky. See, there's a little hole there. In one of the scenes in the film, you see a girl sticking her head through that hole. I actually captured it for one of the title stills for this video. So there you go. There's a map of it there, see? And you can walk up that little pathway there. I think there's a visitor centre which has an exhibition about the film, and then there is this pathway you can go up if you dare. So what's going to happen now is what I advise you do is go and watch the film. That's what you do. Go and watch the film. by wherever you can find it. There's all kinds of places you can watch it. And then I'll do a review, and don't watch the review till you've watched the actual film, and then a little bit later on we'll do a little live stream, and that'll definitely be after I come back from my trip to ASAP and to Mablethorpe, where I'm speaking. I might even do the review before I leave. It depends if I've got time with all the preparation I have to do. It's because I'm in that sort of mood at the moment. So I hope you enjoy it. We'll go into more detail in the review, but I think you will like it. It's the kind of thing that if you like this channel, you'll like this film. Thank you for watching HPANWO TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.